People don't fall in love with people. They fall in love with the version of people they create inside their own minds. The Sophia Empath understands this too late, not because they lack intelligence, because they see potential before they see reality. Carl Jung believed that the human mind does not simply observe the world, it projects onto it. We don't always see people as they are. We often see them through our hopes, our loneliness, our unmet needs, and our unconscious desire to believe that goodness is always hiding beneath broken behavior. That is where idealization begins, not with another person, within ourselves. There was a time when the Sophia Empath believed that every contradiction had an explanation. If someone became distant, they must be hurting. If someone lied, they must be afraid. If someone crossed a boundary, they simply hadn't learned any better. Different excuses, the same silent illusion. The Sophia Empath wasn't ignoring reality. They were editing it, removing every uncomfortable truth that threatened the image they had already created. People rarely manipulate your emotions first. They manipulate your expectations, because once you become attached not to who they are, but to who you hope they could become, reality becomes surprisingly easy to ignore. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious quietly shapes perception. The Sophia Empath eventually notices something disturbing. Every disappointment had been preceded by idealization. Every betrayal had been softened by endless excuses. Every painful ending had begun with refusing to see what was already visible. People don't always hide who they are. Sometimes we hide it from ourselves, because accepting reality often requires grieving an illusion, and grief is uncomfortable. Hope is easier until it isn't. The moment the Sophia Empath stops idealizing people, they begin noticing patterns they once called coincidences, respect that only existed when obedience remained, kindness that disappeared the moment boundaries appeared, affection that quietly depended on how useful they could be. Different relationships, the same hidden design. Perhaps the greatest danger was never trusting people too much. It was trusting the story they desperately wanted to be true. And perhaps that is why Carl Jung believed that awareness is rarely comforting, because the moment you stop seeing people through the eyes of hope, you begin seeing them through the quiet evidence they've been giving you all along. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers that idealization is one of the quietest forms of self-deception, not because it invents lies, because it refuses to accept obvious truth. Carl Jung believed that the shadow doesn't only exist within other people, it exists within us. Sometimes our own shadow is the desperate need to believe that everyone carries the same heart we do. The Sophia Empath once believed that enough patience could heal almost anyone. Enough understanding could transform any relationship. Enough love could overcome every betrayal. Reality never made those promises. It was the mind that did. People often mistake compassion for proof of character. They are not the same thing. Someone can understand your pain and still choose to use it against you. Someone can know exactly what hurts you and quietly place pressure on that wound every time they want control. Different personalities, the same uncomfortable truth. Knowing someone's heart doesn't guarantee you have one of your own. The Sophia Empath begins remembering all the moments they ignored, the joke that felt strangely cruel, the apology that never changed the behavior, the promise that sounded sincere yet was broken in exactly the same way, again and again. Patterns always whisper before consequences begin shouting. People don't betray you overnight. They simply reveal what you refuse to recognize. Carl Jung believed that consciousness begins the moment perception becomes stronger than desire. The Sophia Empath slowly stops asking, "Oh, what did they mean?" Instead, they begin asking, "What did they repeatedly do?" Because intentions are invisible, behavior is not. The person who truly respects you doesn't need endless opportunities to prove it. The person who repeatedly harms you doesn't become safe simply because they feel guilty afterward. Remorse without change is often another way of keeping hope alive, and hope without awareness can quietly become a prison. The Sophia Empath finally understands that idealization never protected relationships, it protected illusions. The moment those illusions disappeared, the relationships didn't suddenly become unhealthy. They had been unhealthy all along. Awareness simply removed the fog, and perhaps this is why so many people fear seeing others clearly. Because the hardest person to forgive isn't always the one who deceived you. Sometimes it's the version of yourself who kept turning away every time reality quietly knocked at the door. The Sophia Empath eventually realizes that people rarely become different overnight. Your perception does. For years, you weren't seeing who they truly were. You were seeing who you needed them to be. Carl Jung believed that projection is not only something we place onto others. Sometimes we project our own values onto them. We assume that because we would never betray someone, they wouldn't either. Because we keep our promises, they must value promises too. Because honesty feels natural to us, surely honesty must matter to them. Different assumptions, the same painful mistake. The Sophia Empath slowly understands that empathy can become dangerous when it replaces observation. Understanding someone is not the same as understanding their character. Character isn't revealed when life is easy. It reveals itself when honesty becomes inconvenient, when loyalty has a cost, when no one is watching. People don't always show you who they are through grand betrayals. Sometimes they reveal themselves through the smallest repeated choices, the message they ignore, the truth they conveniently leave out, the boundary they test again and again. Tiny moments, invisible by themselves, unmistakable together. Patterns are simply small truths that refuse to stay hidden. The Sophia Empath remembers how many times they defended people against their own behavior. They didn't mean it. They're just stressed. They've had a difficult life, maybe, but repeated behavior isn't explained by a difficult moment. It is explained by a repeated decision. People often hope that time changes character. Time doesn't. It reveals it. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious continues repeating itself until it is finally seen. That truth applies to relationships as well. The Sophia Empath notices they weren't trapped by another person. They were trapped by the story they kept telling themselves, a story where every red flag was temporary. Every contradiction had another explanation. Every disappointment was somehow their responsibility to understand. People don't lose themselves in toxic relationships all at once. They lose themselves one excuse at a time. And perhaps that is why the moment you stop idealizing people, your world becomes quieter, not because everyone suddenly changes, because illusion finally stops speaking louder than reality. The people around you remain exactly the same. Only your eyes become impossible to deceive. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers that the most convincing illusion isn't created by another person. It's created by your own hope. Hope is beautiful until it begins arguing against reality. Carl Jung believed that the psyche naturally seeks wholeness, but before it reaches wholeness, it often chooses comfort. And comfort has a dangerous habit. It asks you to protect the image of a person instead of confronting the truth about them. The Sophia Empath remembers every moment they felt something was wrong, a strange silence after an honest conversation, a smile that never reached the eyes, a promise that sounded convincing but somehow felt empty. Their intuition noticed it, their heart dismissed it. Because the mind always struggles to destroy the fantasy it spent so long creating, people rarely fool you without your cooperation, not because you're naive, because hope keeps translating reality into something easier to accept. The Sophia Empath begins asking, what if I believed their actions with the same certainty I believe their words? That single question changes everything. The person who always has an excuse begins looking predictable. The person who constantly shifts blame becomes easier to understand. The person who only appears when they need something no longer feels mysterious. Different people, the same pattern. Behavior never argues with itself, only words do. People often search for hidden meanings. Inside conversations, dark intelligence searches somewhere else. Inside consistency, because consistency is the one thing performance can never imitate forever. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always leaves footprints, not through intention, through repetition. The Sophia Empath finally understands that trust should never be built on isolated moments. It should be built on repeated evidence. One act of kindness doesn't erase years of disrespect. One sincere apology doesn't rewrite a history of broken promises. One beautiful memory cannot carry an entire relationship. People don't reveal themselves by what they do once, they reveal themselves by what they cannot stop doing. Perhaps that is why the hardest illusion to release isn't the illusion about another person. It's the illusion that if you love them enough, they will eventually become the person you imagined. And maybe the deepest lesson Carl Jung wanted us to understand is that maturity begins the moment you stop falling in love with potential and start respecting reality. Because reality may break your heart once, illusion breaks it over and over again. The Sophia Empath eventually realizes that letting go of idealization doesn't make you cynical, it makes you honest. For a long time, they feared seeing people clearly because they believed clarity would steal their compassion. Instead, it protected it. Carl Jung believed that true consciousness is not seeing goodness everywhere, nor is it seeing darkness everywhere. It is seeing both, without allowing either one to blind you. That balance changes everything. The Sophia Empath no longer feels the need to rescue every broken person because they finally understand. Not everyone wants to be healed. Some people only want someone willing to carry the consequences of their choices. Different relationships, the same quiet burden. There is something painful about accepting that your love was never the missing piece. Because if love were enough, honesty would always defeat deception. Loyalty would always defeat betrayal. Patience would always defeat manipulation. But human nature rarely follows what feels fair. People become different only when they choose to become different. No one can choose that for them. The Sophia Empath once believed that seeing the good in people was a strength. It is, until it becomes an excuse for ignoring the truth. Kindness without discernment quietly teaches people that they never have to earn your trust, and trust given too easily often becomes the very thing that is taken for granted. Carl Jung believed that every encounter invites us to confront something within ourselves. Sometimes that confrontation isn't about another person's darkness. It's about our own fear, of accepting reality, because reality asks difficult questions. Why did you ignore what you already knew? Why did you defend behavior that repeatedly hurt you? Why did you confuse potential with character? Those questions don't accuse, they awaken. The Sophia Empath finally understands that awareness is not about becoming suspicious. It is about becoming consistent enough to believe repeated actions more than beautiful promises, consistent enough to stop negotiating with obvious patterns. People often think heartbreak begins when someone leaves. Sometimes heartbreak begins the moment you realize they were never the person you spent years protecting inside your imagination. And perhaps that is the quiet tragedy of idealization. It doesn't change who other people are, it only delays the moment you finally see them. When that moment arrives, you don't lose reality, you lose the illusion. And illusions always demand a far greater price than the truth ever will. The Sophia Empath eventually notices that people become uncomfortable the moment you stop imagining them and start observing them. Nothing about your voice changes. Nothing about your appearance changes. Nothing dramatic happens. Only one thing disappears: your willingness to explain away what keeps repeating. And somehow, that changes every relationship around you. Carl Jung believed that every unconscious pattern depends on one condition to survive: it must remain unseen. The moment it becomes conscious, its power begins to fade. That is why awareness often feels threatening to those who benefited from your blindness. The Sophia Empath begins noticing how certain people react when excuses no longer work. Some become defensive, some become unusually charming, some suddenly accuse you of becoming cold. Others quietly disappear because they can no longer predict you. Different reactions, the same hidden reason. People don't always miss your kindness. Sometimes they miss the version of you that never questioned them. There is a strange silence that enters your life after idealization ends. The constant confusion disappears. The endless analyzing stops. You no longer spend nights trying to understand why someone's words never match their actions. The answer becomes painfully simple: because they didn't. Not every contradiction contains hidden depth. Some contradictions are simply deception wearing the clothes of complexity. The Sophia Empath once believed that if they could understand someone's past, they could understand their behavior. Now they see something different. A painful childhood may explain someone's wounds. It does not excuse how they choose to wound others. Understanding creates compassion. It should never erase accountability. People often confuse the two. Carl Jung warned that whatever we refuse to confront returns in different forms. The Sophia Empath realizes it wasn't just certain people that kept repeating. It was the same lesson, different faces, different names, different promises. Yet somehow, the ending always felt familiar. Not because fate was cruel, because the unconscious keeps introducing the same pattern until awareness finally recognizes it. The day you stop idealizing people, you stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" You begin asking, "What have I been refusing to see?" That question changes everything because it moves your attention away from blaming others and toward recognizing patterns before they become pain. Perhaps that is the quiet beginning of psychological freedom. Not when the world becomes safer, but when your perception becomes harder to deceive. The Sophia Empath eventually understands that the deepest transformation is almost invisible. It doesn't happen when you become stronger. It happens when you stop needing people to be different from who they are. Carl Jung believed that suffering often continues, not because reality is unbearable, but because we keep negotiating with it. We bargain with obvious truths. We wait for consistency from someone who has always been inconsistent. We search for honesty inside someone committed to performance. We expect accountability from a person who survives by avoiding it. And every expectation becomes another quiet disappointment. The Sophia Empath remembers how exhausting it was to keep giving people one more chance. Not because forgiveness is wrong, but because forgiveness without wisdom often becomes permission. People rarely ask for unlimited chances. They simply notice. You keep offering them, that is enough. There is a silent difference between seeing the best in someone and refusing to see the worst. One creates compassion, the other creates blindness, and blindness is where manipulation quietly grows. People don't always manipulate through lies. Sometimes they manipulate through your own optimism. They know. You will explain their silence. You will defend their inconsistency. You will doubt your intuition before you ever question their behavior. That is why awareness changes the balance of every relationship. Not because you become suspicious, because you stop doing someone else's emotional work. Carl Jung believed that individuation begins when a person withdraws their projections from the world. The Sophia Empath finally understands what that really means. It means allowing people to carry the weight of their own actions without rescuing them, without rewriting their story, without borrowing responsibility. That never belonged to you. Some people will call this distance. Others will call it arrogance. A few will even call it cruelty, because people often give uncomfortable names to the boundaries they cannot control. The truth is simpler. You are no longer responding to who you hoped they were. You are responding to who they repeatedly chose to become. And that changes everything. Because once you stop idealizing people, you also stop fearing their disappointment. You no longer lose sleep trying to preserve relationships that only survived through your endless understanding. Instead, you begin protecting something far more valuable, your ability to see reality before reality is forced to teach you again.